Dark, ambient sounds, wind howling, thunder rumbling, a faint whisper barely audible. They're watching. You were never supposed to hear this. In fact, by the time you do, it might already be too late to unhear it. Because once this story begins, once you know what the Blackthorne family truly did, something ancient begins to stir inside you, something they tried to bury, not just in the walls of their estate, but in the marrow of American history itself. It starts in 1862. Not in a city, not in a battlefield, but in a place even darker, a place the maps forgot. Ravenshollow, West Virginia. You won't find it on your GPS, you won't read about it in the textbooks, but if you dig deep enough, in the land records, the asylum logs, the church excommunications, you'll start to see a pattern, a hole, a rip in the story we were told. The Blackthornes were one of the oldest founding families in Appalachia, bloodlines older than coal, older than Christ, some whispered. They claimed Scottish descent, arriving in the New World with gold, manuscripts, and a private creed never spoken in daylight. They didn't build a home, they built a compound, a maze of brick and stone nestled in the mist-drenched hollows, surrounded by black pines that never lost their leaves. Locals said the trees whispered at night, and that someone, watched from the windows, even when the house stood empty. At least, it looked empty. The family motto carved into the front gate read, "Obedience is freedom, blood is legacy, truth is poison." And that, right there, should have been the first warning. Over the next century, generations of Blackthornes would rise and vanish. 19 children disappeared between 1863 and 1944, all documented in midwife journals, but none ever appearing in church registries or burial records. Meanwhile, the Blackthornes never aged, never left, and never answered questions. So why were they protected? Why did government surveyors avoid the area? Why did county clerks quietly remove property tax obligations for 113 years? Because the Blackthornes weren't just a family, they were a system, a method of control. And Ravenshollow was the testing ground. This isn't folklore, this isn't myth. What you're about to hear is a story that ripples through every power structure you've ever believed in: religion, family, country, identity. And we're only just beginning. The Hollow Where Time Forgot, 1862 to 1889. If you step foot in Ravenshollow today, assuming you can even find it, you'll be walking through a ghost. Not just a ghost town, but a place where time itself stopped obeying the rules. Between 1862 and 1889, the Blackthorne estate expanded, not just in size but in purpose. What began as a manor evolved into something far more ritualistic. Subterranean rooms, chimneys with no fireplaces, doors that opened to brick walls, and beneath it all, a vast network of catacombs no one could explain. Locals, what few there were, said the air in Ravenshollow was different, heavy, like it was holding its breath. Birds flew around the valley, never over it. Pregnant women left town in the third trimester. Dogs would howl facing the estate, tails between their legs, refusing to cross the iron gate's shadow. The first to raise alarm wasn't a preacher or a sheriff, it was a 14-year-old girl. Her name was Eliza May Thorne, no relation to the Blackthornes, and in 1871 she wrote a series of letters to her cousin in Richmond describing lantern men who would walk the perimeter of the estate at night, chanting in a language that sounded like breathing. Eliza drew what she saw, a spiral made of numbers, eyes that blinked without eyelids, and a woman in white who floated 3 inches above the floor, her feet bound in barbed wire. Those letters were intercepted. The cousin never received them. But 91 years later, during a renovation of the Charleston Public Library, they were found inside a hollowed-out Bible with Eliza's name etched into the leather in blood. There's no official record of her death. But the cemetery in Ravenshollow has one unmarked grave smaller than a piano case placed between 2 stone angels with broken wings. Locals whisper it's hers, but no one dares dig. By 1889, the Blackthornes had fully withdrawn from society. They no longer traded with neighboring towns. Their supply wagons arrived only at night, carried by hooded figures who spoke to no one. Every piece of correspondence was delivered sealed in wax, marked with the family crest, a coiled serpent swallowing its own tail wrapped around a child's skull. And yet, their influence grew. Mayors came and went. Reverends resigned. Schools closed. And still, the Blackthorns remained untouched, as if something or someone was shielding them from consequence, from justice, from reality itself. And beneath it all, the whispers began, that the Blackthorns weren't just hiding something, they were keeping something in. The investigator who knocked once and never came back, 1891. In 1891, pressure from outside counties finally reached a boiling point. Too many missing children, too many unanswered questions, too many rumors about the house that watches back. So the state dispatched an investigator. His name was Jonathan Alcott, a former Pinkerton agent turned civil inspector with a spotless record and a reputation for chasing down secrets others buried. He was fluent in 5 languages, carried a revolver with 6 notches in the grip, and kept a diary so detailed it bordered on obsessive. He was the kind of man who didn't scare easily, but by the time they found his final letter, he had clawed his own eyes out. Alcott entered Ravenshollow on April 3, 1891. He arrived by train to the nearest station, then by horse-drawn carriage to the hollow itself. Witnesses said the fog swallowed him just past the tree line. The last person to speak with him was a station boy who remembered this. He said the wind didn't blow, it sucked, like the whole valley was breathing in. Alcott's journal was recovered 3 months later, tucked beneath a loose floorboard at an inn 12 miles outside Ravenshollow. The ink on the last 4 pages was mixed with human saliva. The edges were gnawed. One page had fingernails embedded in it. This is what it said. The Blackthorne boy isn't real. I watched him blink sideways. His pupils multiplied. The painting above the fireplace was weeping something black. The walls are warm, breathing. There's music coming from the floorboards, but no instruments, just bones. I was offered tea. It tasted like copper and whispers. I couldn't move for hours. They showed me the nursery. It was filled with teeth. Not dolls, not toys, just teeth. Tiny, filed, organized by age. They keep something in the basement, not chained, not locked, just fed, and wow, or shipped. He signed the last page. If this is hell, it was built by a family, not a demon. Alcott's body was never found, but the carriage he took into the hollow returned 3 days later, empty, except for his revolver. It was still fully loaded. The handle had been twisted until the wood cracked. The state never sent another investigator. The file was sealed, and all further mentions of Ravenshollow were quietly redacted from public records by 1895. But the whispers didn't stop, because even if Jonathan Alcott never returned, he wasn't the last person to enter the Blackthorne estate. He was just the first to leave a warning. The Blackthorne twins, one lived in silence, the other lived in the walls, 1893 to 1902. By 1893, the Blackthorne estate had gone quiet. Too quiet. No deliveries, no sightings, no signals. Just that looming house, still standing, still breathing, with curtains that never moved and chimneys that never smoked. Then, something happened that even the Blackthorns couldn't hide. A scream, a single, bone-shaking, lung-tearing scream that echoed across the entire hollow, and kept echoing for over an hour. Local hunter Caleb Reeve was the first to report it. He swore under oath he heard a child being murdered slowly, then singing afterward. He never hunted again. That same month, the state received an anonymous parcel. Inside, a lock of blonde hair tied with a red ribbon. A small porcelain doll, eyes gouged out, and a torn piece of baptismal cloth marked Blackthorne, Annalise Abram, twins, born March 3, 1890. The twins. The heirs. For years, no one had confirmed their existence. The Blackthornes never listed births, never celebrated, never let their children attend school, but suddenly here was proof, not only of children, but of twins. The story goes like this. Annalise was beautiful, bright, and eerily silent. She never spoke, never smiled, just stared, for hours, days. Once, a visitor said she stood at a window for 2 weeks straight, unmoving, during a blizzard. Abram, her twin, was never seen, not once, not by family, not by staff, not by anyone outside the estate. Until 1902, when a travelling priest, Father Benedict Colgrave, was called to bless the estate for rot and moral infestation. He never completed the rite, but he did pry open one of the nursery walls, after hearing a thumping sound behind it that matched his heartbeat. What he found was human, barely. A boy, thin as bone, skin grey, mouth sewn shut with piano wire, fides, fingers filed to points, covered in inked symbols. Some Celtic, some alchemical, some not of this world. He was alive, and behind him, a shrine, made of teeth, candle wax, and a photograph of Annalise, smiling. The only known photo of her doing so. Father Colgrave left the estate screaming, barefoot, half-naked. He was institutionalized 3 days later. His final sermon was written in blood on the asylum wall. She lives outside the skin. He lives beneath it. The twins were never seen again. But in 1921, during a renovation of the East Wing, a new wall was discovered inside the nursery, built over the old one. Behind it, scratches, deep, repetitive, and a single word etched 429 times, brother. The Forbidden Room, what waited inside the womb, 1903 to 1916. They called it the womb, not a nursery, not a chamber, not a room, the womb. It was located in the northeast corner of the Blackthorne estate, directly above the boiler, and yet somehow always cold. Even when the house was on fire in 1913, we'll get to that, the womb remained untouched, ice cold, no soot, no flame, as if something refused to let it burn. No one remembers when it was first built. It didn't appear on any blueprints. Contractors refused to speak of it, and those who worked near it reported bleeding gums, auditory hallucinations, and one recurring dream, a faceless infant crawling toward them, whispering, "You left me inside." The first recorded incident occurred in 1903. A housemaid named Florence Eddington, 19 years old, entered the womb during a routine cleaning. She was in the room for less than 4 minutes. When she emerged, her hair had turned completely white. Her fingernails had grown an inch in under 5 minutes. She refused to speak, not out of fear, but because, according to her autopsy later that year, her tongue had shriveled into a black stone. Florence left behind a single diary entry, written that same evening. There is no child in that room. There is a want. It pulls. It sobs. It knows your guilt, even the guilt you've hidden from yourself. After Florence, the room was sealed. Iron bolts, salt in the keyhole. Every new servant signed an agreement. Never open the northeast door. Never knock. Never speak its name aloud. But one did. His name was Milo Grant, and he was only 10. The Blackthornes hired him as a message runner between the estate and the chapel down the ridge. One morning he disappeared. No one saw or heard anything, until exactly 1 week later, when a new door appeared on the opposite side of the womb, one that hadn't existed before. It was Victorian, aid of bone. Carved into it, the words, "He opened it for her. Now they're both inside." A letter arrived the following week to Milo's mother. No return address. Inside was a drawing, presumably by a child, a crude stick figure labeled Milo, and another, much larger figure looming behind him with dozens of eyes and no mouth. At the bottom, scribbled in ash, "I fed her what she asked for. Please don't be mad." By 1916, no one in the house spoke of the womb, not even the Blackthornes themselves, but the room remained, waiting, breathing, and occasionally, late at night, weeping. The night the house burned, and no one tried to escape, 1913. On the night of October 31st, 1913, every home in Ravenshollow saw it. For the first time in its cursed, whisper-ridden history, the Blackthorne estate was on fire. Not smoke, not flickers. Flames. High, howling, hungry fire, erupting from the west wing, then swallowing the rest of the mansion in minutes. Orange tongues reaching into the fog, smoke columns twisting into what witnesses claimed looked like faces, screaming but smiling. And yet, no one left the house. Let that sink in. 42 known occupants. 3 generations of Blackthornes. Servants, nannies, a governess. Not a single soul seen fleeing the estate. The Ravenshollow Fire Watch reported to the Hill at 11:41 p.m., just after the chapel bell, long broken, began ringing on its own. But when they arrived, the house was perfectly intact. No ash, no smoke, no heat, just the cold fog, thicker than ever, and the smell of wet iron and spoiled milk. The fire logs were sealed, but an anonymous journal entry, recovered from the coat pocket of a local deputy who vanished 3 days later, described what they saw in chilling detail. We saw it burning, all of us, the town saw it, but the house, it was standing, clean, whole. Not one ember, not one scorch mark. But the windows, they were wrong. Every window showed something different. One showed the nursery, another a funeral, another me, looking out from inside. And in the 3rd floor window, someone was watching. A girl, pale, black dress. She raised her hand and pointed at me, and smiled, and then my brother screamed. That deputy, William Parrow, was last seen walking into the woods behind the Blackthorne estate. His body was never found, but 2 weeks later his entire left hand was mailed to the police station, clutching a blackened tooth with a spiral carved into it. Investigators searched the estate top to bottom. No signs of fire, no bodies. But in the cellar they discovered one anomaly, a single scorched rocking chair, still warm, still rocking, with something carved into its seat. I watched them burn, but they watched me first. After that night, the townspeople stopped speaking the Blackthorne name aloud. Ravenshollow's population dropped by half over the next decade. The remaining residents boarded their windows, built fences, and began sleeping with the lights on, even though electricity never quite worked the same within 10 miles of the estate. And yet, the Blackthornes remained, not seen, not heard, but present. Like a dream you can't remember, but know changed you. Because something did burn that night. Just not the house. Something inside it. The resurrection attempt of 1922. 11 in, none out. By 1922, Ravenshollow had become more myth than map. No post, no phone lines, no more school. But the Blackthornes? They were still there, no longer seen in daylight, no longer hosting guests. And yet, each year, someone claimed to hear a lullaby echo from the house on the same night, March 3rd, the twins' birthday. That year, 11 villagers, the last ones who still remembered life before the estate's shadow, decided to end it. Once and for all. They were armed with fire, salt, and courage scraped from generations of silence. They called themselves the Hollow Redeemed, and they marched toward the Blackthorne Gate under moonlight, chanting psalms backwards, a superstition meant to ward off the hungry things. But they weren't prepared for what they found. The estate wasn't empty, it was dug open. Dozens of graves, many previously unknown, had been unearthed behind the manor, and something had been taken from each one. Not valuables, not bones, tongues, all gone. The last known diary from that night came from Ephraim Laws, a gravedigger's son who had sketched out a rough plan of the attack. His journal was found 3 weeks later, nailed to a tree 5 miles outside town. The last entry reads, "We thought we were hunting the dead, but they had been preparing, feeding, practicing. The twins are not children anymore. She wears a crown of keys. He walks upside down on the ceiling. They spoke into our heads. They dug something up from the basement beneath the basement. Not human, not demon, older. It didn't scream, it sighed, as if waking up was a burden. The villagers never returned. But something did. That same week, 11 birds fell dead on the doorstep of every home in Ravenshollow, all at once. Each had its wings removed. Each had its eyes replaced with tiny carved doll's eyes. Loca, or legend, calls it the Night of the Hollow Eyes. From that moment on, no one tried to enter the Blackthorne estate again. Not for exorcism, not for revenge, not even to bury their dead. The town learned its lesson. You don't challenge what doesn't sleep. You don't resurrect what never died. Because what the Blackthornes unearthed in 1922 wasn't a person. It wasn't even a presence. It was a memory, made flesh, and it remembered everything. The Mirror Room, where reflections lied. 1931 to 1937. In 1931, renovations began on the east wing of the Blackthorne estate, not for beauty, not for expansion, but for containment. According to one rare surviving blueprint, hand-drawn in chalk and later photographed under UV light, a new chamber was added, the Mirror Room, a perfect octagon with mirrored walls, floor to ceiling, and no visible door from the inside. Its purpose? Not art, not vanity, but containment of reflectional divergence. The Blackthornes had discovered something horrifying, that mirrors in the estate were no longer just reflecting light. They were responding. It began subtly. Guests saw themselves blink out of sync. Servants passed mirrors only to see someone else. Similar, but wrong. One footman claimed he saw his reflection whisper something. When he leaned closer, the glass cracked from the inside. By 1932, mirrors were banned in every room except the Mirror Room. They were all moved there, sealed, observed. And that's when Eleanor Blackthorne, age 17, disappeared. Not physically. She was still there, standing in the room, arms limp at her sides, eyes wide open, staring directly at the center mirror. But her reflection? It turned and walked away. Witnesses said she collapsed instantly, but her body never decomposed, never aged. She remained in a coma-like state, breathing, heart beating, but completely vacant. Doctors were brought in. One wrote in a letter to the county medical examiner, "I touched her wrist and felt the absence of presence. Like her skin remembered she once had a soul, but the soul had gone somewhere it wasn't meant to." Behind sealed doors, the family attempted a ritual reversal. They smashed all the mirrors, all but one. Because in that final mirror, Eleanor was still there, not the body, the reflection. She looked healthy, calm, and most chilling of all. She smiled when the real Eleanor's body was pronounced dead on June the 2nd, 1937. After her burial, the mirror was covered in black velvet and locked in a crate. It was labeled only, "Property of the house, do not break, she's still watching." Decades later, in 1969, the crate was opened by mistake during a university donation inspection in Boston. The inspector went blind within hours. He clawed out his own eyes, mumbling, "She knows I saw her. She's following my reflection now." The Mirror Room was bricked over by 1940. But they say if you knock on the east wing at exactly midnight on Eleanor's birthday, October 13th, your own reflection might knock back. Just once. But not in sync. The Nanny's Room, where lullabies never stop, 1938 to 1949, soft lullaby humming. It sounds sweet, until you realize it has no melody. The humming deepens. A child's voice says, "She sings even when I sleep." Then, silence. No one lasted long as a caretaker inside the Blackthorne estate. No matter their experience, background or beliefs, they all broke. Between 1938 and 1949, 8 professional nannies were hired to care for the remaining Blackthorne children. All of them left the estate under horrific circumstances. 3 were found dead, 2 disappeared, and the final 3 never truly returned. They called it the nanny's room. A small chamber located just off the nursery hall, cozy, wallpapered, a rocking chair in the corner that never stopped moving, even when no one sat in it. Each new nanny was placed there upon hire. Each lasted fewer days than the one before. The first, Miss Agatha Crane, survived 3 weeks. Then one night she ran barefoot through town, bleeding from the ears, clutching a pillow filled with teeth, not hers. She was committed to the St. Elgin Asylum, where she spent the next 11 years drawing the same image. A woman, faceless, bending over a cradle, singing. Every drawing included the same line beneath it. She sings even when the baby is gone. The Blackthornes insisted the children were well cared for, but no doctor or neighbor ever saw them again. The second nanny, Judith Summers, recorded her experience. Her journal, hidden inside the wall of her room, was discovered decades later during demolition. In it she wrote, "The lullaby started on the first night. No one was in the nursery, but I heard it. Clear, ancient, wrong. It doesn't have a melody. It has a weight. It wraps around your spine gently, then pulls." On her third night, Judith claimed to see something crawl out of the nursery closet. Not a child, and not an adult. Something unfinished. It blinked with its skin. She disappeared the next day, and then came the twins' final nanny, Mrs. Lenora Graves. She was strict, religious, carried holy water in a silver flask, and slept with a crucifix in each hand. She lasted 7 days. On the final night, the house staff heard her singing back to the lullaby, not in defiance, but in harmony. When they opened her door the next morning, she was gone, but the room was filled with dozens of music boxes, all playing different lullabies, all winding themselves. One was left on the bed, still playing, with a note tucked underneath. She needed someone to hold her while she slept. I volunteered. After that, the room was sealed. But sometimes, when the fog is thick, hikers report hearing a music box playing just beyond the trees near the old foundation, and a soft voice humming along. The song doesn't exist in any known culture, but every person who hears it swears it sounds familiar, like something you were sung before you were born. The Photographs That Shouldn't Exist, 1952. In 1952, the estate was raided quietly by a private preservation society under the guise of cataloguing local architectural history. What they found was not blueprints or property records, but a collection of unmarked photo boxes hidden in a sealed closet behind the chapel. No one had been allowed in that chapel since 1915. There was no dust, no decay, just a camera mounted on a tripod, still aimed at the altar. Inside the boxes, over 300 black and white photographs, each stamped with dates ranging from 1863 to 1951, each labeled with only one word, child. But here's the thing, every single photo, every one showed a different child, different eras, different clothing, different backgrounds, but the same face. Not similar, identical. Wide, unblinking eyes. Mouth slightly open, as if caught mid-breath. A thin scar beneath the left ear, and a gaze that made viewers look away, or feel watched for hours after. Technicians at the Preservation Society were disturbed enough to report the findings. One analyst, Cliff Maurer, reviewed 27 of the photos under a magnifier. Within a week, he suffered a psychotic break, claiming the child blinked during review. He wrote one word across his office wall in ink, over and over, reprint. The same week, the lead archivist, Daria Whitcomb, vanished. Her apartment was found undisturbed, except for a single envelope on her kitchen table. Inside was a Polaroid, dated August the 7th, 1952. It showed her, as a child, standing in front of the Blackthorne estate, holding hands with the same scarred-faced boy from the archived photos. She had no memory of ever being there. And yet, the date matched her 6th birthday. The photo negatives were tested by Kodak. The film was authentic, but something was wrong with the exposure patterns, like the camera had captured more than just light, infrared, radiation, emotion, or something older. In a handwritten letter, the final preservation officer assigned to the case wrote, "They didn't take photos, they took imprints. The estate remembered them and reprinted them for reasons we should never understand." The entire photo collection was confiscated by federal authorities within 72 hours. The public was told it was film degradation. But one crate, mismarked as furniture, went missing in transit. It surfaced years later in a private collector's basement in Vermont. When opened, all the photos were blank, except one. It showed the viewer, from behind, in real time, and a child's hand on their shoulder. The locked room without a door, 1954 to 1959. There is no door to this room, there never was. On the 4th floor of the Blackthorne estate, a level not marked on any blueprint, a floor only accessible by a hidden staircase through the library fireplace. There is a room with no entrance, and yet, it exists. They call it Room 411. Though no official records list it, and the hallway leading to it contains no seams, no knobs, no cracks, just one long stretch of wallpaper that peels in reverse, curling inwards as if the wall is breathing in. In 1954, a team of structural engineers attempted a full survey of the estate's upper floors. Only one returned. His name was Warren Gates. He claimed there was a heat signature on the 4th floor, visible only through thermal imaging, roughly the size of a child, stationary, facing outward, staring through the wall. Warren refused to speak for months after, but his wife reported one detail in his sleep, whispered over and over, "There's something inside that was never born." But it remembers the pain of being buried alive. Eventually, Warren tried to re-enter the estate alone. They found his body just beyond the threshold, his skull shattered, from the inside out. His hand clutched a small piece of wallpaper torn from the 4th floor. On the back, written in red pencil, "She still hears us, but he's the one you should fear." In 1959, a child, 11-year-old Mason Carlyle, went missing during a school dare. He'd broken into the grounds with 2 other boys and was last seen climbing the service ladder toward the upper floors. When police arrived, only one of the boys could speak. He pointed to the 4th floor window and said, "He walked in without opening anything, and then the wall closed around him. That window, the one above room 411, began to fog from the inside every night after sunset, and if you stood close enough you could hear fingernails tapping from within, not asking to be let out, but tapping in patterns." Morse code experts later confirmed the taps translated into one repeated phrase, "I'm not alone in here, you are." To this day, no one has successfully breached room 411. Infrared scanners pick up movement, heat, sometimes breath, but no one opens it, because to open it is to remember what was sealed there in the first place. And the Blackthorns were very clear, not everything forgotten is safe to remember. The children's choir tapes, "Let Them Sing or We'll Wake Her," 1960 to 1967. In 1960, a shipment of decaying reel-to-reel audio tapes was delivered anonymously to the Ravenshollow Historical Society, which had been shuttered for years. No sender, no return address, only a handwritten note tucked into the box reading, "Let them sing or we'll wake her." The tapes, over 2 dozen, were labeled as Blackthorne House Recordings, Children's Choir, 1935 to 1941. But the choir had no names, no public record, no surviving members. And yet, they sing, beautifully at first. Latin hymns, church lullabies, harmless. Until the 4th minute of tape 3, When the pitch begins to shift, downward, the tempo slows. Voices layer, not echoing, but multiplying. New syllables appear, not Latin, not any known language. Then a second choir fades in, deeper, rougher, not human. Sound engineers from the University of Virginia studied the frequency. One described it as a resonance too low for human vocal cords, but too intentional to be mechanical. It's like something was mimicking children through memory alone. Tape 5 is different. It features a solo child, a girl, singing a lullaby with no known origin. Sleep, my shadow, silent and small, she hears you breathing through the wall. At the 112 mark, the child abruptly stops. In the silence, you can hear a second voice, older, breathless, finish the line for her. And she's not sleeping after all. The girl begins sobbing, not frightened, but apologetic. She whispers, "I didn't mean to wake her. She said if we stopped, she'd take our mouths again." Tape 7 contains what sounds like 30 children screaming simultaneously, layered with what engineers identified as the sound of fire, reversed. Each tape gets darker, more layered, less musical, more ritualistic. By tape 11, you no longer hear children, you hear something, pretending to be children. The final tape, tape 24, ends not with music, but with a single spoken phrase, repeated 4 times by multiple voices in perfect synchronicity. She is still listening. She is still listening. She is still listening. You should not be. The tapes were confiscated in 1967 by government officials posing as library restoration workers. All originals vanished. But a single copy, warped and nearly melted, was later recovered in the home of a shortwave radio operator in New Mexico. He was found deceased in 1971. His cause of death, auditory-induced brain hemorrhage. His last transmission? They're not singing anymore. They're remembering. The house that appeared in 2 places at once, 1970. In 1970, 2 separate photographs were submitted to the National Historical Registry, both claiming to document the same structure, the Blackthorne estate. One photo came from a rural survey team in West Virginia, taken March 14th at 11:08 a.m. The other came from a documentarian filming Appalachian decay in eastern Tennessee, taken the same day at 11:09 a.m. Both images showed a 3-story Victorian mansion, twin chimneys, a dead willow tree out front, a 3rd-floor window covered in black drapes, and the exact same broken shutter, hanging at the same 27-degree angle, experts confirmed. Same architecture, same damage, same weather patterns, even the same fog density. There was only one problem. The 2 locations were 137 miles apart, and neither town had ever had a registered estate matching the house in question. Not on record, not in oral history, not in land deeds, nothing. But both locations had one thing in common, a history of child disappearances. 8 in the Tennessee town between 1921 and 1955. 4 in the West Virginia site between 1939 and 1968. None ever solved. The house was never seen again in either location. When both survey teams returned within 24 hours, the property was empty, just empty woods and unmapped terrain. But in both cases, the teams reported a physical reaction to the site, nausea, ear pressure, sudden nosebleeds, the sensation of being photographed from the inside out. And in both sites, the same object was found, a child's shoe, size 6, filled with ash. Inside the shoe, a burned photograph. The image, a man in Victorian dress, holding the same child seen in the Blackthorne choir tapes. But the image was warped, 2 shadows cast from each figure, pointing in different directions. One toward the past, one toward you. Government officials eventually dismissed the phenomenon as a film processing anomaly, despite multiple witnesses and physical evidence. But the truth remained. The house wasn't bound by earth. It was bound by memory, and memories don't follow maps. They follow grief. They follow blood. And sometimes they build new homes. The final child, Elise Blackthorne and the Fire She Dreamed, 1983 to 1989. By 1983, the Blackthorne name had all but vanished. No known heirs, no estate tax filings, no death certificates. But then came Elise. Elise Miriam Blackthorne, born 1975, admitted to Hollow Psychiatric Hospital in 1983 after reportedly setting her childhood bed on fire in her sleep 3 separate times. Her mother, name redacted, claimed Elise would speak fluent Latin while unconscious, though she had never studied the language. More disturbingly, Elise described a house she'd never seen, with red walls that bled, a staircase that led up and down at the same time, and twins who sang lullabies backwards from inside the wallpaper. She drew floor plans, 11 in total. Each one matched previously classified diagrams of the Blackthorne estate, including room 411, which had never been made public. When asked how she knew, Elise simply replied, "I was born with her memories." By age 11, Elise stopped sleeping. Not by choice. She couldn't. Anytime she began to drift off, the walls around her would change. Staff reported temperature drops, mirror fogging, even the scent of burnt roses filling the room. Then came the dream journal. From 1985 to 1989, Elise documented her nightly visions. They all ended the same way. I find the matchbook. I climb the nursery stairs. She's waiting in the crib, but it's not a baby. It's me. And I set the fire. And it doesn't burn the house. It burns what lives beneath it. In early 1989, Elise entered a state of permanent sleep, her body alive, brain active but unresponsive. Doctors called it an anomalous fugue with neural overfunction. But on November the 1st, without any warning, her hospital room burst into flames. Sprinklers failed. Cameras blacked out. When staff entered, the fire was gone, and so was Elise. All that remained: a single, unburnt journal page. A photo, charred at the corners, showing Elise as a baby, being held by a woman who appeared in no hospital or birth records. Written on the back of the photo, "She let me try. But it's not the house that burns, it's the memory pretending to be a house." Elise was declared deceased. But a year later, a ranger in Ravenshollow found something strange. A footprint in ash. Small, barefoot, leading toward the old estate grounds, not away. And nearby, nailed into a tree, a photograph of the Blackthorne estate. Only this time, the third-floor window was open. The confession of Thomas Blackthorne, what he buried beneath the house. It comes from Thomas Blackthorne himself, the patriarch, the architect, the one who built the house. His confession was discovered in 1999, hidden beneath a floorboard in the Ravenshollow town church, sealed in a rusted tin marked, "For After the Silence." Inside, a torn journal, a single iron key, and a handwritten map of the original estate blueprints, with one room circled in red ink. Below, here's what the letter said: "To whoever opens this, I say only this. Do not dig, do not knock, do not listen. We did not build the house on cursed land. We made the land cursed, because we buried something too old to name. My grandfather found it in 1809, a black stone door buried beneath what would become the foundation. It pulsed, it hummed, it remembered us. It did not want worship, it wanted company. So we gave it what it asked for. Every generation, a twin, one to feed it memories, one to live above and carry the weight of the forgetting. But we failed. We stopped forgetting. I thought by building the house we could contain it, lock it in patterns, trap it in time. A memory cannot spread if it is held in place, but a house is just wood and breath, and memory finds cracks." The key found in the tin matched a hidden sub-basement beneath the estate, a space never on any blueprint. In 2004, a team of researchers attempted to explore the area. Their findings were classified, but an anonymous audio file, later leaked and verified as authentic, recorded the last 17 seconds of their descent. It ends with the sound of a metal door swinging open, Then a child crying, a woman singing in a language with no consonants, and a man whispering, she is no longer inside the house. The house is now inside her. None of the team returned. The estate finally collapsed in 2013 after a lightning storm set the grounds ablaze. No structure remained, only a crater, no fire, no smoke, no ash, just absence. Visitors who step into the space where the Blackthorne estate once stood report strange effects, forgetting where they are, speaking words they don't understand, and worst of all, hearing lullabies they remember from childhood, lullabies they were never taught. And some swear they see a small girl standing at the tree line. She never speaks, but if you blink, she's gone. And in her place, just for a moment, the outline of a house appears, not whole, but remembering itself. This is where it ends. Or maybe, this is where you begin to remember.